Yeah, before we get to the agenda, just one quick process thing. The environments working group owns about 5 docs tests that haven't been automated. I think we went through and manually verified that these docs are working for the last release, but yeah, if we can get owners for some of these, that'd be great. We don't have to assign owners now, but just to make you all aware well in advance of the release. And then, yeah, looks like John has a few topics. So.
Oh, wow, we got a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss, I forget which one this one is. But yeah, so there's been a proposal to, as the description says, terminate Envoy when the connections become 0. So the idea is kind of a more graceful shutdown. Right now, we just always wait 5 seconds, which is either too long or too short. So the idea would be that we instead keep waiting while connections are open, and then we will exit only when they're closed. So it gives us an approximation of exiting Envoy when the application does. The kind of open question is how do we, like, what knobs do we expose to configure it? Because we kind of need like a minimum amount of time to wait. Otherwise, there's a race condition where, like, if the very second that kubelet kills a pod, they send a request or something. And we already have an existing configuration flag, so what do we do with that one? If you scroll down a bit, there's a long comment that I had about various different options.
How do we detect if the application died?
Well, that's the thing, is we don't detect the application being alive, but we detect whether there's open connections. So it may not even be a good idea. I think it's certainly not 100% reliable if you have an application that, for example, it shuts down, it does a bunch of work, and then tries to like write it to some database at the last second, because there wouldn't be an open connection while it's doing a bunch of work. I think it would help the common case though, so it may still be worthwhile to do it. And then in that case, they could configure it to always wait however long they're setting it today. Like they would already have to set that today to wait a long time to stay alive.
So they are going to, application is going to close all sockets when it dies, if there are no open sockets. So if we are not, are we lame duck, I think?
Yeah, so immediately we go into draining mode, which will send like the connection close headers.
Okay, so no new connections will be accepted at least.
Well, they'll be accepted, but then they'll
be rejected. Yeah.
If the client behaves well, they'll be closed immediately after.
So it sounds reasonable to detect at least if there is no connection, it's clear there is no point in waiting. I mean, there is no, if it's possible in Envoy to get this signal.
Yeah, I mean, the way we get it in the PR is somewhat hacky, like it's using the stats, which is a bit suspicious, but.
With the injection less, I mean, having the starter in the application is very easy, because application, we start the application. I don't know if we can inject some, I think we discussed in the past adding some binary to the container, either through init container to mounted volume or something.
Yeah. And
that will be something that will solve all our problems basically, because it will launch the application, it will detect when it dies. It can.
Yeah, that is another option.
And it's consistent with what we are doing with Docker, VMs, and other places where we have full control and where we don't have this problem in the first place.
To do the starting too, like waiting to start.
Waiting to start is another thing that is perfect, because then you can that would be a clean implementation of wait to start actually, because.
Yeah, and it would be transparent too.
It will be transparent mostly. I mean, if it's a Docker that doesn't have any dependency.
No, I mean, we don't even need to do like Docker image building. Like we could make it.
Yeah, you need volume.
Yeah, volume that's shared between the two containers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Open or close.
And it will be perfectly consistent with the injection-less thingy. But I mean, if you build a Docker image, you probably have the binary already. You don't have any problem. If not, it's. I love this idea because it's
I think it's worth exploring.
And the startup is actually more important than shutdown in many ways. And I think we already always complain about.
Well, we do have that hack to.
A hack that is very similar. It's doing a shell, no?
Well, it's kind of relying on the kubelet pre-check to like then loop and.
Which is a shell.
Yeah.
Which distroless probably doesn't have, no?
Oh, it's a command and pilot agent, so it does work for distroless.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. It's not modifying the app container though.
But it's kind of oh, it's not modifying up.
No, it's a pre-start or pre-stop hook or something like that.
Other opinions? Sorry, we are in a room, so.
Sorry, could we go back for some context on the existing options and the option of this PR ads? Yeah, sorry, I just don't have all the context here.
Yeah, the existing option is basically there's this environment variable called termination drain duration, and defaults to 5 seconds. And basically, we just wait that amount of time and then we exit. There's also a Kubernetes setting, which is somewhere named termination grace period seconds, which is basically when the pod exits, it will send a sig term to the pod, and then after the grace period, it will send a sig kill. So if you don't gracefully shut down within 30 seconds as the default, then it will kind of forcefully kill you.
So that means that every time you stop a pod, you need to wait 5 seconds. I mean, which is a problem for rolling upgrade. It's a problem for a lot of. I mean, it's not a major problem, 5 seconds, but.
Yeah, but it's also like it's neither. It's always either too slow or too fast, right? Yep. It's never just right. So, but I mean, the way this is implemented, it's actually at minimum 5 seconds and could be longer. So it doesn't actually help the shutdown quickly case. Otherwise, we're at risk of like a last second request. And then we see there's no connections and we close too early.
Yeah.
So the kind of wrapper may actually would be more effective there since it actually looks at the process.
If the application doesn't close all of the connections, does it hang, or is there like a force kill?
Well, eventually that termination, like Kubernetes, will force kill us.
Okay.
But after 30 seconds.
30 seconds, yeah.
Sure.
So basically, if the application doesn't handle sig kill, sig stop is the first, no?
I thought it was sig term then sig kill.
Sig term.
Yeah.
Sig term.
So if it doesn't exit on sig term, then it's going to hang for 30 seconds, but and we will die anyway by after 5 seconds.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if we should live just as long as the app. There's no benefit of exiting before the app, right? Mm-hmm. Because the pod won't go away until the app exits. So it just it's not like we're saving time by exiting early.
And the application is expectation of the developer is that they will get 30 seconds to clean up and do whatever. So if they expect that their connection without Istio, they'll have 30 seconds where they can still keep the connections alive and do whatever. And for long lived connection, sometimes it's useful to have this. Should we bite the bullet and do the hack? I mean, not the hack,
I'm a bit concerned about making the hack a default, but I think it's a good option. It's certainly.
For shutdown, I agree with you. For startup, I think it's a much better solution than what we have.
Well, I'm just concerned about modifying their container. We're not modifying the Docker image, but we're modifying like the container.
Even better.
I think it will work in a lot of cases, but I could imagine at least it would cause fear in some very security paranoid people for some reason, or some obscure edge cases. I don't know. It's definitely worth experimenting with, I think.
It's like pilot agent. It's a binary that we run, No,
I think it's definitely worth checking out, and maybe we find out it's great and we should just turn it on for everyone, or at the very least an option. Like right now, the waiting till we start is an option. And there's downsides, but there's also plenty of upsides, and I think it's
so effectively we are talking about pilot agent here. I mean, we are going to copy pilot agent to some volume and then mount it in the application and run pilot agent run, which I think someone already implemented the next option pilot agent. So it's
basically kind of we signal somehow from we could either run pilot agent fully
or a subset. Yeah,
I don't know if we'd want to run it fully actually. Then we'd have no cipher.
Or
I think just
better.
A signal to the container. Like we mount some shared BDS socket or something, and we send some signal like I've started up, and then I'm shutting down. Okay, and that happens to be the same thing we are doing for injectionless for Docker, meaning that we probably this will also bind as a proxyless gRPC bootstrap, and so we don't have to run a proxy container. Well, it's similar, right? Similar, yeah. One of them is signaling. No, but this binary can do a few things. I mean, I would. Okay, I'm sold. Everyone has opinions on?
Yeah, I mean, This sounds great. Yeah, the only thing I guess I would say is like where should the user be able to configure this, right? Would this be a candidate for like a proxy config? Uh, uh, part of the CRD, that you guys are implementing, or is this going to be like a global thing? When the user does configure this, I think this is a good step forward. Honestly, the only downside I guess I would see is that after working with a lot of people, people don't do graceful shutdowns very well in their kind of environment. Like they're not listening for SIG terms, and a lot of users have poorly written applications that basically have to be force killed. I don't know. We can't worry about those kinds of things. Like if people are doing bad practices and things like that, and they're just going to get force killed, then it's like, yeah, that's fine.
But
that gives them the same behavior they have today, though. Like if their app waits 30 seconds, then we'll wait 30 seconds and get force killed, and no problem.
Well, it is better than we have today because if the application is hanging for 30 seconds, we'll also hang for 30 seconds, and so it's better than.
Oh yeah, it's better than today. I mean, it's the same as today without Istio. Like adopting Istio won't slow down their pod shutdown.
Including shutdown.
Okay.
So does this mean I no longer need to config this at stop time because now we have this intelligence to terminate Envoy when there's no active connections, especially for distroless, because our users are struggling with how to config this for distroless, right? So we default to 5 seconds, but so if user doesn't do anything, this is pretty transparent to them, right? If I understand correctly.
Absolutely, and I think on the previous question, if it should be an option in proxy config, I don't think it's something that we want long-term as an API, because ideally, if this works, that will be the default, user doesn't have to worry about anything, either startup or shutdown. So we may remove the options that we have for startup, because that will take care of it naturally. Is there any reason not to have it by default at some point? I mean, after we test it and including startup.
I think we'll have to see. Like, I think if short term it would be some environment variable or experimental option, whatever, and then
global,
long term we'll see if it's something that we can just turn on or if it belongs in proxy config.
Yeah, it would be really nice if this is stable and we enable by default. So this triggers me a related question. So you know how we had hold the application until your proxy is ready, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about the need to hold the proxy. I guess it's hold the application. I think it's hold the proxies from stop until the application stop. Would this actually eliminate the need for the stop sequence between the Envoy sidecar and your application container? Because when your application container is still running, you're not shutting down your Envoy.
Yeah, it would handle both the startup and the shutdown.
Oh, it would handle startup too. I missed that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even need code the application until proxy is ready then?
Nope.
No, it could replace it, I think.
It will replace it, and it's much better because the starter can know, it has far more control. I mean, you can communicate with the proxy through some socket or some other mechanism, and you can, you don't have to have the wait, sleep 100 millisecond, try something.
Okay, that's interesting. Your PR says terminate, so I was confused. I thought it was.
We just discovered that it's.
Oh yeah, so Lynn, I don't know if you joined late, if you missed. So this PR would only solve shutdown, but we talked about an alternative that would solve both, where we kind of insert our binary that kind of does the waiting on both ends.
Okay, cool. Wow, that's very powerful.
Yeah. So my question was, what are we going to use to say, to turn this from, false to true, right? So if it's an environment variable, are we just going to give it some time to kind of incubate, or, can we get some feedback from, some users, or how do we intend to measure that so that we know, I don't know, because if it was up to me in my world, I would just turn this on. Right?
Turn it on master, let it rest, nobody complains, and we leave it on. Otherwise, we turn it off before release. So.
Yeah, I think this is the most requested feature in Istio, so we'll get plenty of feedback, I suspect.
Okay, then that's great then.
Yeah, I will. Does someone want to experiment with this?
So I'm experimenting with this on the for the Docker.
Yeah. So
I can do a small experiment as well. So it's basically a way to start the injectionless because it's exactly the same thing. And eventually this can grow to also fetch the init container. Okay.
All right. Sounds like we should move on to the next one.
So John, I'll try with my starter. That is the one I'm experimenting with, and I'll let you know if it works or doesn't work, and then we can sync up and figure out what how to move forward.
Okay. Yeah, let's actually skip the next one. That's mine as well because we have a lot of stuff. I'll move it to the bottom.
Okay. Yeah. What is the case today where the proxy exits before the application? This would fix that case as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. Did you want to skip this one too, or?
No, I mean, this is just real quick. Just we published the Helm charts now. There's a lot of Istio charts that people were unofficially publishing, so it'd be nice if people went and like started or something. So it'll show up first. That's all. And use them, of course. That's it.
Cool. Do we want to do an announcement or put it somewhere where I feel like a lot of community people would probably start anyway?
Yeah, I put it on there's a big issue with like a bunch of stars for publishing the Helm repo. I posted it there. Once we actually publish 1.12, I think in the like release announcement, we should highlight it as one of the big things. So, but right now it's only for 1.12. And
so which one is it? The one from Howard Johnson? John or?
No, there's an official one. There's official Istio.org. It should say official verified publisher.
Okay.
So kind of along similar lines, lately, we've had, people, request annotations and labels and other things that aren't visible in Helm. My feeling is that once we actually go live with this, there's going to be kind of more requests for, other things that Istio does support within our Helm charts. Should we come up with some kind of a policy or a mechanism, or are we just going to, just approve a lot of these like configurable items that people are going to be writing issues on? Because right now, what I'm thinking happens is people put the charts into their own CI/CD, and then from there they're able to kind of modify them, as needed. Versus if they're using an official Helm repo, I think there's going to be a desire for them to kind of not kind of work in that old workflow. Should we take a stance on that before we go live? And if so, we can defer this.
Joe, I think we discussed, I don't know if you missed, I think few meetings back, we discussed this same subject and someone was sending a PR or something. My opinion at that time, and I don't think anyone disagreed strongly, was that we should support everything that the normal Helm charts, I mean, if it's a standard pattern like annotations, labels, that is commonly used in the Helm world, we definitely should support it. And annotation labels fit in this category. So if it's part of, I think John did the experiment with creating a Helm chart from Helm create init or whatever.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of things there that are presumably common. If it is not in that list, then we need to be very, very careful because we need to support it long term and we need to make sure that we really want it. Knowing that people have the alternative to use the old Helm charts, which are not published, but they can download from the repo that has 100+ options.
You can also point them to the customized plugin.
Plus customized plugins that we also discussed. That is
exactly. So we should probably just like put some, point to customize. Yeah, so we should probably include that as part of the Helm documentation. I can take that action item.
But not as required thing. I mean, it's just that if you really want to do things that are not commonly done,
Sure.
you can use customize or you can use old charts. Both of them are fine and good solutions.
Okay. Yeah. No. That actually sounds appropriate. Yeah. So we'll just make sure that we document that so we don't get here's every single option I want added to the values or whatever. Okay. Sounds good.
Let's write it down. If there is agreement, let's write it down so we don't rehash it next time. Did you add a schema, value schema? I remember you had a PR.
For the gateway only.
Oh, only for gateway. I was not seeing it. Oh, super. Okay, next topic.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of bring to the working group attention. It seems like there's a few pretty severe issues with the revision-based upgrade using the in-cluster operator. And I don't necessarily know who should own these issues right now or who has expertise in this area. So I just kind of wanted to get some visibility on it. I looked into these issues when they were reported, and it seems like the wrong revision of in-cluster operator is reconciling revisioned Istio operator resources. So it's pretty broken. And I guess overall, maybe to raise some discussion on whether we want to continue to support the in-cluster operator. Yeah, that's basically it. Because I don't know who owns this feature right now.
In-cluster operator upgrade. Do we still want to support it?
I'm a bit skeptical of saying it's deprecated just because of the churn, but I could do kind of think that we should go and on the doc say like this is not the recommended approach. We strongly recommend you use other ones because right now, if you go, it's the second one on the list. It doesn't really have anything telling you not to use it, so people will just use it. I think we should disincentivize people from using it because there's a ton of bugs. It's not just this one.
Yeah, I think the community has kind of come to understand that it's not as supported, or at least from the issues and Slack threads I'm reading. It's kind of people warning each other about not using the in-cluster operator.
But it's a bad experience to find that out by wasting 8 hours trying to get it to work. And I think it'll be way less useful once we have the gateway stuff, because all it will install is Istio D. And if you've already installed Istio D, or if you've already installed the operator, you could have just installed Istio D directly. So there's kind of minimal benefit to use it now that we'll have one deployment to install. Whereas when we first made it, we had like 10.
Especially if the gateway is automatically created.
That's what I mean. Like you're creating a deployment to create one other deployment. So what's the benefit really?
Which creates another deployment for gateway. So it's kind of chain of
like you might as well, if you can create one deployment, then you can create a different one. That's Istio D.
So regardless of the future of in-cluster operator, I think these issues we should still fix. And either I can take these, or actually Tong I should be able to take care of any known issues. Yeah, and I mean this is notwithstanding what we decide with operator. I don't think if there's something that's obviously broken, we should fix it.
So I think that will also reduce the number of bugs if we kind of de-emphasize it in the documentation. I think the important thing will be to see if we have a migration path from in-cluster operator to either Helm or Istio Catalan. I think that is possible today now.
Yes. So Helm, I guess it's not really straightforward. There's not there's not really an explicit path. I think we could work on defining something. For operated Istio cattle, that's a very straightforward move.
I think for Helm is also because Helm install doesn't interfere with operator, so it's just a different revision. Only base will be affected. So you can just do a Helm install Istio and then delete operator, and everything will be fine.
I think that's largely true. The only possible wrinkle could be if somebody started using the non-Helm fields, in which case there's some manual migration involved, but it's not anything terribly difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can definitely do it. We just don't have a Docker test or anything. So is there any concern with putting some warnings and not recommending in the doc on Istio.io?
I don't have any concerns. I think it sounds like that's the consensus. So, I think it makes sense to have as few installation paths as possible. And if really there's no longer anybody that absolutely needs operator, it used to be that some folks were using that as a kind of a basis for a service offering. But if that's no longer the case, I don't think there's any compelling reason to keep it going, and the fewer installation paths, the better, I think.
Okay, so we are left with two installations: Istio cattle method and Helm.
Yep.
That's good enough.
Okay.
Go ahead, Don.
So should we announce the deprecation maybe first and then remove it next release after?
I don't think we should deprecate it. I think we should just tell people not to use it, which sounds like the same thing, but.
So we'll continue to support it. Deprecation means scarce people, means that we are removing support. There is not a huge cost to continue to support it at the level it is today. So if it works today, it can work 5 releases from now, and it's less scary for users. I mean, it's.
Yeah, we just want any new user going to the doc should not install the operator, basically. But we don't need to tell existing users that they need to get off it or say that we're going to remove it anytime soon.
Okay, that's cool.
And I don't think we should plan to remove it even. I mean, it's fine. It's as long as it's working and we can support it, and it's not a huge cost to fix the bugs, because it's very close to what Istio cattle is doing. So it's not.
Yeah.
Tong, did you have a hand up?
Yes. Yeah. And I just want to echo what Martin was saying. And the fact that we have this issues open by a customer, that means the people still using it. So we should fix them, and I have no issue to take on those issues and send to me and try to fix up.
Oh, that's so much appreciated, Tom. I do know there are users using them. It's just as who's willing to maintain them.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been trying to fix operator-related issues in the past few months. So.
Thank you, Tom. Do you mind if I tentatively assign this to you?
Yeah, no problem at all. Please do.
Thanks.
Speaking of deprecation, one thing that we do need to deprecate, probably, I don't know if it's official or is part of the Istio cattle operator API. We have the gateways, we have all kinds of options that are probably not doing anything anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have any doc or any indications that those are just empty strings, basically. I mean, do nothing. We probably need to go over the operator API and mark whatever is still doing anything at all and what is deprecated and what we want to keep long term. Okay.
So I do have a quick question on how operator in cluster upgrade is supposed to work. If you have revisions, because I noticed when you're doing an upgrade, it'll just reconcile older and newer CRDs over top of each other. It'll just kind of flip flop. I don't know how that's supposed to necessarily work.
Well,
The
it's
base.
yeah. Canary was never. I mean, it's supported in theory, but in practice, it's very tricky to set it up so that it works correctly. Which is why it's for Canary. It was never really advertised as something that we recommend operator for. But the short answer is that you can install operator so it only watches its own revision, and you need multiple copies of operator to have Canary work correctly. So it's unless it's broken, I know that it used to work in the past, but it's a challenging setup, and not something that we would recommend as a good UX.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, what I'm saying is, even if you have the multiple revisions of the in-cluster operator, when they reconcile, my understanding is they'll overwrite the base of the other, what the other operator had just written. If that makes sense. So I don't know if we need to do some leader election maybe between in-cluster operators, or.
Let's not get too far. I mean, we want just to fix bugs and try to reduce. So if it flip-flops, we can just not touch them, not update it, or. So idea is to minimize the amount of changes and support we need to do for the operator if it's no longer recommended.
Yeah. So it just on that specifically, if I remember, it's been a while since I actually set this up, but I think the way we dealt with that is just not to install base in one of the operators.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what Sam is onto something though, because if the in-cluster operator has a big limitation, we should highlight, and it would help people make decisions too, right? If the same, we don't have enough people to support and we're not recommended, and this could be one of a critical reason why.
Should we maybe be somewhere between not recommending and deprecating and call it like maintenance mode or something, that we'll continue to fix some bugs, but we're not actively developing it, and you probably shouldn't adopt it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, given that Canary is in wide use now, and I think we should probably explicitly say that it's not recommended for Canary upgrade.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I like the term maintenance mode, because probably for some of our other APIs will also go to maintenance mode.
Yeah, like gateway virtual service in the long term, but I think that is a good thing. We're at this point in the project, it's very, very, very hard to deprecate something. So I think maintenance mode will be kind of the future way we deprecate things.
And also we should advertise and make clear in the website. I don't know how we can explain to the users that we are committed to support all the features that we launched, but some of them will be in maintenance mode, meaning they will work for a very, very long time, but we still do not recommend people to use it, but we recommend the new APIs, kind of.
Yeah, we need to craft their messages pretty clearly, and also making sure user knows, there are alternatives that hopefully are way better out there. Which in the case of the networking API, I'm not sure, the Kubernetes Gateway API, user would be willing to switch at the moment.
Well, not yet. I'm talking like in a year from now or.
Okay, yeah, a year from now for sure. Yeah, but now it's not. But this operator thing, especially like Canary update, revision based, if there's a known issue, we can communicate that in the maintenance. Yep. Yeah.
So people who already use it, they can keep using it as long as they want. They don't need to be worried that it will stop working, but we'll not add new features if we are not fixing major things. We just make sure that we test that it still works with the features that it has today.
It's basically like the oldest release kind of, but for a specific feature.
Yeah.
Like we'll fix bugs, security issues, but we're not pushing features.
Yeah.
And we can fine tune that more as we start putting more things in maintenance mode. But I think operator is a good start. We can probably bring this up at TOC too if we want.
Yeah.
For the higher level.
Yeah, we should.
We may make some changes. For example, for the base, we can say that operator is only operating on Istio D itself, but you will need to do Helm install or Istio Cattle for the base, so we have full control over the base.
Yeah.
And that will solve some of the Canary problem because the Canary will install with Helm or Istio Cattle. And okay, let's fine tune it. I think we spend enough time on.
Yeah,
We're-
I like that thought, right? Yeah, I do think it's worthwhile too. If we could support just for ECOD, I think that would be very valuable.
Cool. I can own documenting the maintenance mode change.
Yeah, Sam, I can help you review too.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll probably loop a bunch of you all in.
I did other items there. I don't want to sneak it in. For gateways, we will recommend the new way. I mean, standalone, user operated independently or automated when it's available. And we are going to I don't know, deprecate or maintain. I mean, I don't know if we will still want to support the operator managing gateways. That's my concern. When we have both Helm, clean charts, and automatic mode and
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's more work to remove it from the operator if we're going to keep it in Istio.
okay, that's fine too.
Yeah. Like, you shouldn't do it, but
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to recommend people to do it.
yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Sam.
Yeah, let me present this next one. Yeah, so hopefully this is pretty quick. I just wanted to get some opinions from environments. So basically there was a problem in our webhook patching where we removed leader election from the validating webhook, and we never had it, I don't think, for the mutating. I could be wrong. We might have removed it like a year ago. But basically, this is a problem because when you have multiple replicas of Istio D, they can fight each other when they're updating their respective webhook. So basically the thought was we don't need leader election because only one revision should be patching. And then the problem there is, okay, well, you can have multiple replicas in a revision that you do need to leader elect among. So this PR basically adds a new leader election type that says, okay, this is a type of leader election where only one replica in every revision can win it. So if you have revision red, revision green, both of them have two replicas. One replica from red and one replica from green will win the leader election. So that's the general idea. And so I got a comment that perhaps we want to do this for every leader election in Istio. Okay, I guess John actually made a separate comment since I looked.
Yeah, I don't think we want that. Only for things that are patching revision objects. Otherwise, like it doesn't make sense to have multiple leaders of a global object, right?
I mean, it's for example, for gateways for objects that are shared, it will be catastrophic because we already had the bug where two revisions were fighting with each other because they are not idempotent.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say you're also working on having the default revision. So the default to win and to become the validator, and shouldn't the default version also be the one that is patching and doing all the other stuff instead of having a random red, green, whatever?
Not exactly. So for webhook patching, only the given revision knows the cert to patch in, and each revision handles its own webhook.
I don't think that's necessarily true, or because we still share, all revisions share the same root CA, and all revision are using the same Citadel certificate.
Wow.
Well,
is that true?
No, absolutely necessary, because otherwise they cannot talk with each other. So if you have workload, I mean, the premise of revision is that you, at the end, all workloads can communicate with each other. So
the MTLS certificate, yes, but the control plane certificate could be different. It's typically not, but it can be.
Typically not, but then I don't know. Because the downside of this is that it will be very desirable to have a default or some dedicated hyper, because that's the dangerous part. That's the most dangerous part in Istio. If the revisions wouldn't participate in election, and we had, I don't know, we don't have another controller, but at least we can say that the default Istio or a dedicated Istio takes care of the. Okay, let's table this. I have another topic which is very closely related with this, so I can discuss the parameters. So you go ahead with the other stuff. And
okay, sure, yeah. So basically, this is fixing a bug that's present in 1.11. So I just wanted to see if you all had any thoughts that this was unsafe somehow, because changing leader election is actually hard to make changes to in later releases. So yeah, are we all right with this as a 1.11 fix that gets backported?
How does it work with upgrades, since the older versions are using the older?
Right. It does not.
but
So they'll both. I mean, it's fine in that case because the old revision is broken among, like the older revision is going to be fighting each other for the old webhooks like it was, but at least the new revision is fixed. So it doesn't make things any worse. I think it makes things strictly better for the new revisions.
But any reason not to have the default revision? I mean, the only problem is that the certificate may be different. Do we?
Yeah, I think that's the issue. Certificate maybe.
How can the certificate be different? Istio doesn't.
Like, for example, if one of them is using the Kubernetes signer and one's using the self-signed.
Yeah.
I think the origin of this was that someone had like a bug that somehow caused them to be out of sync. I don't know why. And it was like just retrying infinitely.
Is this a feature that, I mean, this whole signer is. There is another alternative, really, which is to, I mean, are we going to install the East-West gateway or some similar gateway by default? We discussed in the past, I know you didn't necessarily agree that we should have a gateway and have the webhooks and everything behind a gateway that is actually dispatching. Mm-hmm. So instead of having, I had a PR at some point to have the default version also in the same pod with Istio deploy a gateway. So basically there will not be, one different webhook per revision. There will be only one webhook that is a default, and default can dispatch through a gateway route to different revisions. That has other benefits. I mean, you can put a real certificate, so we don't have to patch anything. You can support better external Istio and because external Istio is really a gateway. I mean, the Istio is behind a gateway. And should we explore this again? Should we discuss? And it's not hard. I mean, we had it before in 1.0, I don't know, 3 releases back or 4 releases back. Istio had the sidecar, which, acted as a gateway or can act as a gateway.
So is the idea there that because we know the default revision, we can just have validation requests get dispatched like proxy to the default revision? That makes sense. Yeah, an interesting idea. Again, we could only have that would let us have just a single validator and single mutating webhook, I guess.
Yep. The default will be a fixed URL, same certificate always. And then we use MTLS and regular Istio between gateway and Istio.
Yeah, that's probably a whole separate proposal, but that's a really interesting idea.
It also means that we can implement percent switch between Canary and, because right now we have a very strict routing between revisions and Istio-Ds. But with a gateway, I mean, having a default gateway that terminates XDS and all requests basically in the default, we can have, 20% go to a canary, and then if canary is down, go back to the principal. So pretty much what we are doing for revision, for regular applications when we do traffic shifting and subsets. Let's think about it. I mean, I don't know. It's probably more work, but it's going to solve many problems and create more opportunities especially with multi-cluster, fallbacks, and a lot of other things will be possible with that.
Right. Okay.
Okay, this can also become the east-west gateway. I mean, if it's bound, I mean, if it's another container in Istio-D, it could be the default out-of-box east-west for VMs and other things. We don't have to do another install because right now it's a bit painful to.
Yeah.
Let's think about it.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. That makes sense to me. If we could review this PR though, and either say like it's maybe too dangerous, or move it forward just because it's a 111 bug. So yeah, thank you. That's everything on that topic.
So what's the chance to hit this? I'm just curious.
So what's that?
Is this an intermittent issue that people would hit? Oh.
I think it results in a lot of error logs in Istio-D because it'll try and like update the webhook and then get a conflict. I don't think it's like a release blocker type thing, or it's not like a huge issue, but it's a.
It is a huge issue if you have two Istio-Ds that use different certificates, because then one of them will be broken.
Right, and that normally happens when you are in the middle of, I guess, rotating your.
No. If you are trying to be too smart and try to do things like use one Istio-D with Citadel, one Istio-D with something else of different. I mean, if you mess with undocumented APIs, you may get into a state that.
Yeah, to be honest, the only way I know this would happen is if you migrate to the Google version. I don't know if any other user would be impacted.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I was wondering, I haven't heard people reporting this, but now it makes sense now. Yeah, it's only when you're changing your certificate for Istio-D.
Yep.
So even then, would it be an issue? Just because I guess if the replicas roll out at different times, but this is only a problem with two replicas of the same revision stomping on each other, not two separate revisions with separate certificates.
Then that should just be, that's a bug if they're different.
Yeah.
Like two replicas should have the same.
Yeah. Okay. So then this is not a problem in that case. This is just for the same revision.
Okay, then let's not worry too much about it. It's but we still should still look at if using a gateway wouldn't improve other things. I mean, not in this context, not for this bug, but.
Okay. Can we think of any other cases where we want a single replica from each revision to win a leader election? If not, I'm happy to close this with won't fix. Or maybe just remove the error log, actually.
If we can make the error log less chatty, because I believe I've seen those in the error log. I think that's all.
We added back off in another PR, so it's not doing it every second. It goes up to like a long back off. So
exponential back off, yeah.
Okay, so then maybe this is not a big issue. Okay, cool. And yeah, Costin and John, you can get yours in ahead of this one.
Oh, validation. Yeah, no, just a quick. Are we at validation, or are you still discussing
validation?
Validation. So With the validation URL, there are a few things about validation that I have a question about people more familiar with validation if they can answer. My understanding has been that validation is not actually doing anything, any lookup in the Kubernetes cluster is more or less stateless. I mean, you can have a validation webhook that is, holding all version. It's version specific, but not revision specific, and it's not dependent on what you have, what else you have in the cluster. So someone could have a single, Istio.io validate that all validation in the world are pointing to, and that will validate revisions without any. There's some privacy implication. You don't want to have a Istio.io do all the validation, but it could be something provided by Kubernetes, provided by someone else. Not necessarily that way. Kubernetes Gateway is planning to have such a central validator for Gateway.
Yeah, well, that would be on GKE probably only, but.
On GKE, but other vendors probably you can do the same thing. So basically, they don't expect Nginx to install gateway validator, Istio to install a gateway validator, and Linkerd to install a gateway validator. So it'll be one per Kubernetes install. The question is if we can do something similar for Istio, where we kind of move validation, maybe out of Istio even, or in an Istio that is dedicated for validation, or for central Istio or external Istio as a service, validation as a service, basically. And decouple it from the current model where, we have election, a particular Istio is validating, and it's pretty complicated, I would say.
So the election is only for patching the webhook, not for serving it. And we could definitely have validation as a service. With
it's not only for patching. I mean, it's also you need to select which one. I mean, it's a default version, and because we who's validating? I mean, you have revision A, revision B. We have a lot of complexity around it.
Right. I don't think that in the default install we should ship validation as a separate thing, but I do think that being able to separate the code so that you could run it is fine, and I think trivial to do. It'd probably be a 10-line change, I suspect. One thing we could also do is we could probably move probably 80% of the logic to the open API schema, so Kubernetes will do it for us. Although if we don't move 100%, then it doesn't really help us that much because we still have the webhook.
Well, it does help us because the 80% will be validated even if you don't have the webhook, which is faster and.
So I think we could probably do that and should, but it won't solve these problems.
Yeah. And the other question is if we can make it backward compatible. So if you have 112, if it is capable to validate for 111, and because we had the discussion about which validator do you use if you have 111, 112 at the same time in the cluster. Obviously, you cannot create 112 resources because 111 will be confused. But if we use the 112 validator and 112 can validate 111. And
so what the URL would be validate/1.11.
Yep, because that's the only thing that validation care about. I mean, 111 and 112 and the version.
Seems reasonable to me.
Okay, let's explore it. Let's spend some, because validation hasn't changed in a very, very long time, and with Open API validation improving, it's not even clear how much it's doing.
I suspect we can't move everything. I actually know we can't move everything to Open API, but probably a lot of it we can, which I think is worthwhile.
Probably aligned with when Kubernetes Gateway, we moved to Kubernetes Gateway 6 months from now or 1 year from now, whenever. Since Kubernetes will take over Gateway, probably that will be a good time to schedule for validation changes in Istio as well and keep it stable until then. But because then we'll no longer have to validate Istio Gateway, and probably other APIs will migrate upstream and become.
Yeah, if you look at the Gateway API, they have a ton of validation and they have exactly one check in the webhook. Everything else is Open API. So it's pretty capable these days. How hard that will be with our protobuf stuff, I have no idea though. Could be a huge pain.
What's the proposal here? I'm sorry, I might have.
The proposal is to figure out if we can improve validation and turn it into a revision independent service that could be provided by in a multi-cluster environment. You have only one validator running somewhere, and you don't have to worry about, validation is revision A or revision B, and it's,
I'm curious if Google provided like validate istio.google.com, if people outside of GK would use it.
Oh, but we can do Istio.io validate.
That's true. I would feel a lot more comfortable having a runtime dependency on Google than on Istio.io personally. But
It will run in Google.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's true. I don't know if it would. Yeah. I mean, it certainly won't be like you have to be able to run it in cluster for a lot of setups. It's private, whatever. But something that we could consider. I don't know how willing people off other to use it, but I think it would work for them if they wanted to.
Another benefit of a central, Istio.io/validate is that in a CI/CD system, you could just call this with the proper certificate, and you can validate your own configs without actually going to a specific cluster.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone will. I mean, if we host it under Istio.io URL, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's Google or IBM or someone else that actually is providing the server or multiple validators. It will help a lot of people because they will, be able to use it in automation and other things. Okay, no proposal actually. It's just opening for discussion and ideas. I mean, if we are interested.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Right now, the way validation switches is like the tag command basically just swaps around the where the singleton webhook points. So if we can make that better, yeah, it'd be awesome.
Okay, John, you have 30 seconds.
Oh yeah, so I talked a lot about this gateway automation stuff. I have a PR. I think it's ready to go. That's pretty much it. I think we should do this. Is there any concerns, comments? Just review the PR. One thing we kind of talked about a bit before is like where will it run, and kind of the conclusion that I personally came to was that running it in Istio.d is the kind of only thing that really makes a lot of sense, because like the whole point is that there's zero friction to getting started, and if you have to go install the gateway operator to use the gateway, then we've kind of defeated a lot of the purpose. So with this, the user will just do helm install Istio.d, create a 5-line gateway YAML, and everything will just automatically work out of the box. So it's a pretty nice experience.
I mostly agree. There is one thing that in other contexts as well, it may be useful to have this as a standalone container that is version independent and is not tied to Istio. And still put it in Istio.d as a separate container, because
so I definitely agree that this should be able to be turned off and run standalone, because there's security implications to
Exactly.
It's in Istio.d, and it's very reasonable for someone to say, I want this separate. But I think in the default install, it should be.
Oh, no, it should be included as an option in Istio.d, but as not part of Istio.d binary, but as a separate controller if we can do it. So it's if I have Istio 110 and I want to use gateway controller, I can take gateway controller 112, put it in a different class, because not. And then it's faster iteration. Basically, we can iterate on gateway much faster, because especially if you start materializing the Istio resources. Right now it's in memory, but you could, if you have a controller, you can create a Istio gateway, Istio virtual service, and everything that is currently created in memory. And then we can add support for gateway much faster and without.
Yeah, so I guess there's two parts. Like, is the deployment part is fairly unlikely to change. It's like 100 lines of creating a deployment and service, and having a separate container seems to be complex. If we completely split out the gateway stuff, then it may make more sense.
Okay, but let's keep it in Istio design, and I guess with master election and other things we can have basically. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully the gateway stuff will stop changing so rapidly too as it stabilizes, right?
Yeah, that's also true. Okay, let's ship it. I think it's super awesome.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the main controversy, is where it lives in the permissions. But if we're okay with that, then it's pretty straightforward. There is some not invented here, but I have a long comment explaining why I did that, and I think it's for the best. This actually, It's extremely simple, like just creating these 3 resources, but it's very hard to write a controller in Kubernetes that does the right thing, apparently. That's what I've learned.
So are we going to document this as it doesn't work for Istio gateways?
No, it's only Kubernetes gateways. So right now we have pretty much no docs for the Kubernetes gateways. Once this merges, I'll probably update the current doc to give a lot more detail. Right now it's like 10 lines and to discuss this. And I think the way we should push this to users is that in the Kubernetes Gateway API, a gateway is the infrastructure and it represents everything. And there's an opt-out mechanism if you want to manage it yourself as for advanced use cases. But like that should be kind of the default, is like a gateway is the actual infrastructure as well, not just a configuration object.
I was wondering if in the 3 install mechanisms for gateways that we have today for Istio gateway, we should have a 4th one that say, hey, create a Kubernetes gateway, and then use virtual service and use Istio gateway in addition to that. But instead of using Helm install gateway or whatever Istio cat operator, you say that, hey, create a resource Kubernetes gateway, and that will automatically create
in a Helm chart though?
Not in a Helm chart. User creates a Kubernetes gateway foo.
Yeah.
And that will create the gateway, no?
Yeah.
And then it creates virtual service. So instead of
so it, yeah.
so it's an install mechanism
Okay.
for